I know it just got quiet. We're not starting yet, but as soon as the ranking member gets here, we'll start. You can be noisy again. It's okay. Good morning. We'll call the committee to meeting now, and we want to thank everyone for coming today. Over the past year, this committee has turned its attention to an issue that is increasingly serious for small business, and that's cybersecurity. In past hearings, we heard firsthand accounts from small business owners who have been victims of cyber attacks. We've also heard dire warnings from cybersecurity experts about the new and varied cyber threats facing America's 28 million small businesses. There's no question that advances in information technology have helped small businesses to increase their productivity, become more efficient, and ultimately more successful. However, the same tools and resources that have given small business owners a greater role in the marketplace have also provided cyber criminals and foreign bad actors with more opportunities to steal sensitive and valuable information that small businesses rely on to remain competitive. In 2015 alone, the United States Department of Justice recorded nearly 300,000 cybersecurity complaints. We've also learned that a cyber attack can have serious consequences, not only for small businesses, but also their customers and their employees and business partners. 60% of small businesses that fall victim to a cyber attack close up shop within 6 months. 60%. A 2014 survey from the National Small Business Association estimated the average cost of a cyber attack on a small business to be over $32,000. In our committee's efforts to spotlight these serious and growing threats, it's been abundantly clear that the federal government needs to step up its game when it comes to protecting the cybersecurity of small businesses and individuals. And to some extent, federal agencies have begun offering resources directly to small businesses in recent years. Today, we will hear from some of the federal agencies that are already providing cybersecurity resources to small businesses. We will examine how these tools can be more easily accessed by small business owners and ensure that they are effective. Since the late 1990s, the federal government has become increasingly active in protecting our nation's critical infrastructure and information technology, or IT systems. It has gone to great lengths to coordinate these efforts with state and local governments, as well as the private sector. However, it wasn't until recently that the federal government was encouraged to engage in greater information sharing practices with businesses through the development of an overall framework for cybersecurity protocol. The framework would enable businesses of all sizes to implement a set of best practices for assessing cyber threats and reinforce their cybersecurity systems. Just last year, the House passed the Improving Small Business Cyber Security Act, a bill that helps small businesses facing cyber threats by providing access to additional tools and resources through existing federal cyber resources. The bill became law as part of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2017. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and other federal agencies have been permitted to work through the Small Business Development Centers, SBDCs, to streamline cyber support and resources for small businesses. While I believe this is a very good start, I think it is glaringly obvious that federal agencies tasked with providing cybersecurity resources to small businesses can be better coordinated. They should drive down duplicative resources and processes and ensure that small businesses are equipped to deal with the growing cyber threats. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and their points of view on how we can more efficiently disseminate federal cybersecurity resources to all of America's small businesses. And I would now like to yield to the ranking member for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Developing new innovations is fundamental to our nation's prosperity in the 21st century. But these technologies can only be beneficial if small businesses can adopt them without fear of malicious cyber attacks. Cyber crimes are becoming more commonplace and more sophisticated. And no matter what form they take, they can be devastating to business owners and their customers. A single attack can wipe out a small business, making cybercrime a severe problem for small entities. While businesses of all sizes must increasingly monitor cyber threats, small firms must prepare for these problems with far fewer resources than their larger counterparts. Because of the complexity and costs associated with implementing a security plan, only 31% of small firms take active measures to guard against such attacks. More than 80% of the time, the owner handles cybersecurity personally, making small firms more vulnerable than a competitor with a dedicated IT security consultant or staff member. In fact, last year, 60% of all targeted attacks struck small and medium-sized entities. These actions have costly implications for the small companies. The average cost of a data breach is nearly $200,000 and leads to 60% of targeted small businesses closing their doors within 6 months of being attacked. Because small firms stand to lose so much without data protection, it is imperative they have the resources of the federal government at their disposal. The federal government has a duty to secure federal information system and assist in protecting private systems. All agencies have their own duty to protect their system, but due to rapid changes in cyberspace, agency roles are complex. The presence of over 50 relevant statutes addressing various aspects of federal cybersecurity responsibilities adds yet more confusion. And because agencies are busy navigating the rules pertaining to their own system, efforts to help small firms have generally been neglected. However, the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and the National Institute of Standards and Technology have all recently embarked on efforts to assist businesses with cybersecurity needs. Additionally, federal spending on cybersecurity is expected to rise to above $20 billion over the next several years. Implementation of the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015 continues moving ahead. Despite this progress, collaboration between agencies and small firms is lacking, which affects us all. We must improve our efforts to help small businesses overcome these challenges. I was pleased, for example, that the National Defense Authorization Act includes a provision instructing SBA to coordinate with DHS to develop a small business cyber strategy. Most importantly, it leverages the SBA vast network of small business development centers, which have a proven record of helping entrepreneurs all over the country. Although this is a step in the right direction, we must do more to encourage small firms to protect themselves and their customers from cyber threats. Today's hearing will give us an opportunity to review federal investment in cybersecurity and how we can facilitate collaboration with the small business community. We cannot accept the bare minimum as our nation seeks to end continued data breaches. With that, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today, for your participation and insights into this important topic. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady yields back. And if committee members have opening statements prepared, we'd ask that they be submitted for the record. And I'll now take just a moment to explain our lighting system. It's really pretty simple. Each of you get 5 minutes. We all get 5 minutes, and the lights will assist you in kind of keeping within that. The green light will stay on for the first 4 minutes. The yellow light will come on to let you know you got about a minute to wrap up, and then the red light will come on, and hopefully you're finished by that time, or will be shortly thereafter. So if you could stay within those, we'd greatly appreciate it. And I'd like to introduce our very distinguished panel here this morning. I'll begin with our first witness, Maureen Olhausen, who is acting chairman of the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. She was sworn in as a commissioner back in 2012. She also served as director of the Office of Policy Planning from 2004 to 2008, where she led the FTC's Internet Task Force. And we welcome you this morning. Our second witness will be Chuck Romine, director of the Information Technology Lab at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Dr. Romine oversees a program that promotes U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness by developing standards and guidelines for federal agencies and U.S. industry. And we welcome you here, Doctor. And our third witness will be T. Rowe, who is the president and CEO of America's Small Business Development Centers, or SBDCs. He's also the chairman of the Small Business Legislative Council and a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Council on Small Business. Mr. Rowe also served the Small Business Committee for 10 years as counsel. So welcome back. And I'd now like to yield to the ranking member to introduce our fourth witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. James Mooney, President and CEO of Chevron Federal Credit Union, located in California and serving members since 1935. Mr. Mooney is also the Cybersecurity Committee Chair for the National Association of Federally Insured Credit Unions. He's testifying on behalf of NAFCU, which is the only national organization exclusively representing the nation's federally insured credit unions. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from our distinguished panel. And Ms. Olshausen, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the committee, I'm Maureen Olhausen, the Acting Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, and I appreciate the opportunity to present the Commission's testimony on data security, and in particular, our efforts to coordinate with our partners at NIST, who I'm pleased to be with here today, and the SBA to educate small business. Data breaches are commonplace, and in the case of small business, a data breach can be devastating. While they may never make headlines, the majority of attacks target small and mid-sized companies. And as you already mentioned, according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, some 60% of all small businesses shuttered their doors within 6 months of a breach. Now, the Federal Trade Commission is a small independent agency with a large role to play when it comes to data security. And we are committed to protecting consumer privacy and promoting data security in the private sector through enforcement and education. The Commission enforces several statutes and rules that place data security requirements on companies. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which covers certain financial institutions, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act covering children's information, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act covering credit report information. The Commission also enforces the FTC Act, which applies to a broad range of companies. The core requirement under each of these laws is that companies must maintain reasonable security. None of the laws contain prescriptive, detailed legal requirements. Rather, their requirement of reasonable security is a flexible one that is scalable for small companies. A company's data security measures must be reasonable in light of the sensitivity of consumer information it holds, the size and complexity of its data operations, and the cost of available tools to improve security and reduce vulnerabilities. Since 2001, the Commission has used its authority to take action against approximately 60 companies that it charged with failing to provide reasonable protections for consumers' personal information. In each of these cases, the data security failures were not merely isolated mistakes. Instead, the Commission challenged alleged data security failures that were multiple and systemic. The Commission has made clear that it does not require perfect security, that there's no one-size-fits-all data security program, and that the mere fact that a breach occurred does not mean that a company has violated the law. In addition to law enforcement, the FTC offers guidance to help businesses of all sizes improve their data security practices. In November, we released an update to Protecting Personal Information, a Guide for Business, a guide we first published in 2007. Last fall, the FTC released guidance describing immediate steps companies should take when they experience a data breach. And in 2015, the FTC launched its Start with Security initiative, which includes a guide for business that summarizes the lessons learned from the FTC's data security cases. As part of this initiative, the FTC hosted events across the country, bringing business owners together with industry experts to discuss practical tips and strategies for implementing effective data security. Last year, staff presented our Start with Security materials to thousands of small business owners on 6 cybersecurity webinars sponsored by NIST and the SBA. Now, we are especially sensitive to the needs of small business. Sole proprietors and companies with just a few employees generally do not have full-time information technology or human resources staff. And that is why I have directed FTC staff to create a one-stop shop on our website with materials specifically for small business. And in the coming months, we will expand our business outreach on data security issues with a focus on helping very small companies identify risks and develop data security plans. So thank you for the opportunity to provide the Commission's views, and we look forward to continuing to work with the Committee and Congress on this critical issue.
Thank you very much. Dr. Roman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss NIST's cybersecurity efforts as they relate to small businesses. The IT security challenge for small businesses looms larger than ever. Since nearly 99% of all U.S. businesses are small or medium-sized, a vulnerability common to a large percentage of these organizations could pose a significant threat to the nation's economy and overall security. NIST has worked with federal agencies, industry, and academia in cybersecurity since 1972. NIST's role to research, develop, and deploy information security standards and technology to protect the federal government's information systems against threats to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information and services was reaffirmed in the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014. In 2016, NIST released a major revision to the popular report, Small Business Information Security, The Fundamentals. The report is designed for small business owners with little cybersecurity expertise and provides basic steps needed to help protect their information systems. NIST's Framework for Improving Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity, or the Framework, was released 3 years ago. The framework's voluntary, risk-based, prioritized, flexible, repeatable, and cost-effective approach was developed for use by organizations, including small businesses, to help manage cybersecurity-related risk. Key to the continuing success of the framework is that it is voluntarily implemented by industry and voluntarily adopted by infrastructure sectors. In addition to the cybersecurity framework, NIST has developed over the past decade an extensive set of security standards and guidelines, including a risk management framework that can be customized for small businesses and voluntarily implemented to help protect intellectual property and organizational assets. Building on the success of the cybersecurity framework and the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program, NIST released the draft Baldrige Cybersecurity Excellence Builder, a self-assessment tool to help organizations of all sizes better understand the effectiveness of their cybersecurity risk management efforts. Using the Builder, organizations of all sizes can determine cybersecurity-related activities that are important to business strategy and the delivery of critical services, and prioritize investments in managing cybersecurity risk. Since 2001, NIST has partnered with the Small Business Administration and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's InfraGuard program to sponsor regional computer security workshops and provide online support for small businesses. The workshops feature security experts who explain information security threats and vulnerabilities and describe protective tools and techniques that can be used to address potential security problems. In 2016, NIST partnered with the SBA, the Federal Trade Commission, I'm grateful that we're here together, and the Department of Energy to provide cybersecurity training webinars to hundreds of small businesses. The National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE, led by NIST, released the draft NICE Cybersecurity Workforce Framework in 2016 to help our nation more effectively identify, recruit, develop, and maintain its cybersecurity talent. NIST is also piloting the establishment of alliances to coordinate regional activities addressing the cybersecurity workforce shortage. The NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or NCCOE, collaborates with experts from industry, academia, and government to create and promote standards-based solutions to real-world cybersecurity problems using commercially available products in the form of technical practice guides that can be used by organizations, including small and medium-sized businesses. The NCCOE project on mobile device security, for example, provides guidance on the implementation of capabilities to secure sensitive business data residing in the cloud and being accessed by employees on mobile devices. Small businesses are more innovative, agile, and productive than ever, thanks to the capabilities delivered by information technology. But the IT security challenge looms larger than ever. The NIST programs described today demonstrate that NIST's cybersecurity portfolio is applicable to a wide variety of users, including small businesses. NIST is fiercely proud of its role in establishing and improving the comprehensive set of cybersecurity technical solutions, standards, guidelines, and best practices, and of the robust collaborations enjoyed with its federal government partners, private sector collaborators, and international colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present NIST's views regarding security challenges facing small businesses. I'll be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Rowe, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Shabbat, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of America's SBDCs. SBDCs operate in all 50 states and D.C., Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and Guam. Every year, SBDCs assist over 200,000 small businesses, and last year we helped those clients gain nearly $7 billion in sales. But that statistic comes with a hidden peril, cybercrime. More of our clients do business online, and every one of them is vulnerable. They want to do more business online, but they have weaker online security, and they can be a gateway to clients, partners, and contractors. And those secondary attacks are now a regular problem for our small business clients. And not all hacking is for financial gain. 2 years ago, websites were plastered with Islamic State logos. Among them, Montauk Manor in New York and Eldora Speedway in Ohio. No financial information was stolen, but they had to rebuild their sites and restore client confidence. SBDCs are working to spread awareness of these threats and build training programs at SBDCs all across the country. Around the nation, we're developing programs to build capacity and our training skills. In Florida, our network is working with former DHS Secretary Tom Ridge to develop a series of training videos. The New York SBDC published a cybersecurity planning guide, which I think all of you have in front of you, which we're disseminating to other states to help them build their capacity. We began developing these resources because advising clients on the internet as a business engine also requires education on the dangers of cybercrime. Under the 2017 NDAA, SBDCs are now working with Homeland Security and SBA to leverage our resources and provide enhanced training and assistance. We want to develop cost-effective, high-quality tools for small business and a network to share information and threat analysis with those small businesses. I want to thank the members of this committee for working on that language and getting it into the NDAA. The timing couldn't be more critical. While SBDCs are training small business on the first line of their cybersecurity needs, the internal focus of basic security practices, threats and weaknesses, ways to help them protect their customers and themselves, we're looking at a bigger effort, and that's the external demands of cybersecurity. On the commercial side, large businesses are going to place growing demands on their small business suppliers. What certifications are they going to ask for? What kind of systems? And who's going to supply those certifications? And more important, who's setting the standards? Last year, the FCC stepped in and declared ISPs to be common carriers. Now they've pulled back in favor of harmonization. but small businesses are left wondering who's actually making rules. And while Verizon and Comcast are battling Google and Facebook over this, what regulations will end up being placed on small business? We know small businesses can be a backdoor. Does that mean the rules will be set by the biggest firms at the expense of the small firms? Google already declared certain websites to be unsafe if they don't have what Google considers adequate security. Now, HTTP versus HTTPS is serious, but how many small businesses know this? And how much business will they lose because eBay wasn't HTTPS compliant and Google users couldn't find them or wouldn't go to them? And then there's the government side. The previous administration was proud of meeting small business goals. Will that last? They also put out a lot of cybersecurity regulations. The DoD and the FAR Council issued cybersecurity amendments to their acquisition regulations. And Homeland Security recently released 3 more proposed regulations for their acquisition regs. How are all of these regulations going to operate? And how will the agencies harmonize them with FISMA and the FTC? And will the standards be set at the convenience of the largest contractors? And what about the subcontractors? If you have a cybersecurity protocol for large prime contractors that flows down, it can easily freeze out small subcontractors. That's why SBDCs are glad we're working with DHS and SBA now, because we want to head off this confusion. A lot of our members work with PTACs and do a lot of procurement assistance with small businesses as well as regular business assistance. And we want to ensure that opportunity isn't sacrificed for cybersecurity. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mooney, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Shabbat, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here for this meeting today and representing on behalf of NAFQ. As you know, cyber and data crime have reached epic proportions in nearly all sectors of the economy. As the ranking member mentioned in our opening statement, 65% of all targeted attacks last year were struck at small and medium-sized companies. Now, credit unions and other financial institutions are required to protect data consistent with the provisions of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Unfortunately, for other entities that handle sensitive personal and financial data, there is no comprehensive regulatory structure comparable or similar to GLBA. It is with this in mind that NAFQ supports comprehensive data and cybersecurity measures to create a national standard to protect consumers' personal information. From the perspective of the financial services industry, cybersecurity and data security are inherently linked. Securing consumers' personal information and financial accounts requires the entire payments ecosystem to take an active role in addressing emerging threats. Since 1999, GLBA and its regulations have proven to be effective in limiting data breaches and protecting valuable information among financial institutions. Regulators have developed robust guidance to help institutions create information security programs and enterprise risk management policies to address data and cybersecurity needs. In addition, they oversee financial institution cybersecurity through periodic examinations designed to assess the risk associated with IT environments of various sizes and complexity. The Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council has adopted the guidance of our friends from NIST in creating its Cybersecurity Assessment Tool, or CAT. The CAT is a voluntary tool that credit unions and banks can use to gauge their cybersecurity readiness in advance of regulatory examinations. Credit unions and banks have also benefited from the availability of government initiatives aimed at coordinating information sharing, identifying emerging threats, and promoting greater cybersecurity expertise. A recent NAFQ survey found that credit unions use a range of government resources to maintain awareness of emerging data security threats, and to develop stronger cybersecurity standards. NAFCU has also engaged Treasury's Office of Critical Infrastructure Protection to suggest areas of improvement and future opportunities for public-private collaboration. Information sharing is a key weapon in credit unions' arsenal against cybercrime. To that end, NAFCU has recently collaborated with the industry-led Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center to promote awareness of a new information sharing initiative specific to credit unions. Now, financial institutions are not the only targets of cyber attacks. Cyber criminals are realizing that merchants and retailers are often the weak link in the payment system. Retailers are an attractive target because they are not currently subject to any federal laws on data security or breach notification. Data breaches at retailers can have a significant cost to financial institutions. From 2013 to 2016, data breaches have cost my credit union an estimated $833,000 just in member notification and card reissue expenses. This doesn't even account for the actual fraud losses. These costs are almost double what Chevron Federal Credit Union pays annually for information security systems and services. Unfortunately, credit unions are rarely reimbursed for the costs associated with the majority of data breaches. As member-owned, not-for-profit cooperatives, it is our members who ultimately bear the burden. These concerns have led NAFCU to urge Congress to create a national standard for data security. I outline the key principles of this in my written testimony. In conclusion, cyber and data security are the responsibility of every participant in the payments chain. Credit unions and their 106 million members across the country are looking to Congress to advance meaningful and robust data security legislation. It is time to level the playing field and create a national data and cybersecurity standard for everyone in the payments ecosystem. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, and we thank all the witnesses for their testimony this morning, and I'll begin the 5-minute questioning by each of us if I recognize myself. I'll begin with you, Ms. Olhausen. You thoroughly outlined the differences and the different resources that the FTC offers to small businesses, from guides on best practices to blog posts encouraging businesses to use email authentication and how to identify ransomware. And this is precisely the kind of information that small businesses need, no question about that. However, I have concern that we are just not reaching small business owners quickly enough or comprehensively enough, that there's a lot of them out there that just don't know about these offerings that are there for them. Do you have metrics on how many small businesses that you are impacting, and what efforts are being made at the FTC to disseminate information more broadly? And finally, do you have any suggestions on how the federal government as a whole can provide a broader audience with cybersecurity resources?
Thank you for your question, Chairman. First, starting with metrics, we do try to keep track of how frequently people access our materials, our guides, our videos, websites, things like that. And just one small measure, we actually have filled orders for 500,000 printed copies of some of our business education. It's available on our website. We do try to reach out to let people, small business, know about it, and we work with our federal partners. We're always happy also to work with members of Congress if you would like to put this on your website or brand it on a website. We also work with other organizations, community organizations, and we're happy to go out and do events around the country to bring this to small business. I've actually personally participated in several of those.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rahman, in your testimony you mentioned NIST's partnership with the Small Business Administration and the FBI, as well as your cooperation with the SBDCs. Have these partnerships been effective in reaching small businesses? And if so, do you think they could serve as models for future interagency collaborations to assist small businesses developing cybersecurity systems?
I'd say, Mr. Chairman, yes, they have been highly effective. The extent of penetration we don't have statistics for, but I think small businesses have definitely benefited from the partnership and from our campaign in partnership with both the InfraGuard program with the FBI and also the SBA. I think it's been highly effective.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Rowe, do you think it would be beneficial to have a single entity to coordinate cybersecurity resources across federal agencies? And if so, what would be the architecture of such an entity? And are there any existing agencies or government entities that would be positioned to take on such a role?
Well, I'm always kind of loath to suggest creating more government, but I do think, at least on the procurement side, the FAR Council's there for a reason. And the FAR Council should be, frankly, focusing better on making sure that everyone in the federal procurement arena is informed and has adequate resources. Now, that's just a specialized area. On the commercial side of it, I think we've got a lot of resources here, and as you said, I think the biggest problem we have is they're not coordinated. I mean, we have 1,000 centers, and we're working like crazy to try and keep people informed and give them the best possible resources. The biggest problem you have is the average small business owner is, well, we like to call it trapped in the whirlwind. They've got 5,000 things to worry about, and sometimes this is not the wolf closest to the sled. I believe we need to coordinate in much the same way we have an interagency trade promotion coordinating committee. There should be a cybersecurity coordinating committee between the agencies.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Mooney, with the remaining time, I'd like to move to you. I know that there's been this distributed denial of service attacks going on and ransom, et cetera, and it's been hitting the big folks, but it's hitting small business folks as well. It seems like a 21st century bank heist where the robber basically says, give me your money or I'll shut down your website, in essence. And could you comment on that? What's being done about that? How can people protect themselves from that type of thing when they literally grab a hold of everything and want ransom in order to give you back your computer system? If you could turn on the mic. That's right.
Mr. Chairman, the key is to have a security system that is multifaceted and multi-layered. And in our case, we have built in for as many of those kinds of contingencies and attacks as we may face, as well as we can predict. And so what we find, again, is that there's no one answer to any security problem. You have to attack it in multiple ways, and that's what we tend to do.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Olhausen, you have testified about ways the FTC has provided resources to consumers and businesses to improve data security. You mentioned today that you hope to centralize information for small businesses. The #1 consumer request for 13 years running has been an annual report on ID theft and data security. So has the FTC considering such report that includes information on the latest threats and how we can mitigate those efforts?
Thank you for your question. The FTC does collect information about what the biggest consumer threats are. We have a system called Consumer Sentinel. ID theft, you are absolutely right, has been a very much a top concern. We've tried to counter that on several fronts. One is giving advice to businesses about how they can secure their data. Another is we have an identitytheft.gov tool on our website that helps victims of identity theft create a personalized plan to get their good credit and name back. I think that in addition to those things, we also bring our enforcement actions where necessary if a company hasn't taken appropriate steps.
And why is it that difficult for the FTC to produce a report geared to small businesses that provides a comprehensive view of all the threats and how they can mitigate them?
Well, we could certainly consider doing a report. We do have our Start with Security brochure that gives a step-by-step approach for small business on how to take steps to protect, and then if there is a breach, how they can remedy that breach. And if a report that is tied to the current threat would be of additional interest to businesses, we can certainly consider that.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney, despite the widespread nature of cybercrime, there remains a great deal of confusion in the legal system as to when individuals and businesses should bear losses and when financial institutions should be held responsible. Do you think that legislation is required to address this issue on a national basis?
I believe it can. And the reason I say that is, as you noted, it's very ambiguous right now. And what I think really would clarify matters tremendously is if we had a national standard related to security practices, one that goes beyond what we have today. Today, Graham-Leach-Bliley, as I mentioned before, provides that kind of clarity for banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions. Outside of that, there's really no clarity at all. And what we recommend is that there be a national standard along the lines of GLBA that provides a kind of flexibility, scalability, and risk-based assessments that will add to the clarity and allow everybody to step up to the plate in the payment system.
Okay, thank you. T, would you like to comment on that? I know that you don't like legislation.
Well, I can't say that. I made my living off of legislation. But I think you raise a good point. We have so many small business clients who are surprised to find out that when their account got drained, there's no recourse. They're not like a consumer who is, I think it's Regulation E that protects them. They're under the Uniform Commercial Code. So basically, it defaults to that reasonableness standard. And the whole problem with a reasonableness standard is what's reasonable is shifting all the time. And it's hard to tell if you're a small business where the bar has moved to.
I know that it hasn't been long since we passed the NDA or it was signed into law, but in terms of the SBDCs working on implementing and disseminating a cyber strategy, what type of progress so far?
Well, we always run into the problem in a transition, but we've been talking with SBA. Jack Bianco at SBA has been very helpful, and Holly Jackson from Homeland Security, who's in their cybersecurity and stakeholder engagement, which, boy, I never knew you had that in cybersecurity, which is great. So we're getting started. As I said, we've already organically begun our own efforts. The larger concern for us is going to be what you talked about. How do we develop? You talked about the report, but how do we develop basically a threat analysis and information network for small business? An annual report, well, that tells you what happened over the last year, doesn't tell you what's going on now.
Thank you.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, who is the vice chairman of this committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, in your testimony, you or in your written testimony, I should say, you have some statistics there that are mind-boggling. Cybercrime costs the global economy $445 billion every year, with the damage to business from theft of intellectual property exceeding the $160 billion loss to individuals. So you're looking at $600 billion of loss total there. 50% of the businesses, you say, have been small businesses have been victims of cyber attack, and over 60% of those will go out of business. My question to you is, did they go out of business, or will they go out of business because of the liability exposure that they have there, or did they go out of business because of the money that's stolen from them, or because of the reputational problems that they've had to be able to stay in business? A combination of all those, or can you answer that?
Sir, I'd say it's a combination of all of those. I would say that the financial loss is generally the hardest hit for a small business. As you and the members of the committee know, small business, they live off of cash flow, they live off of their capital, and a hard hit to that is something that's very difficult to overcome.
Now, with regards to the small businesses, though, do you see any of them being sued for the lack of adequate cyber protection, data protection?
That goes to what Ms. Olhausen was talking about. What's reasonable? If a small business has got decent cyber protection, is that a reasonable amount? I honestly don't know. The problem is that bar keeps shifting as technology changes. We're working on things now that, frankly, blockchain technology is going to change massively.
Ms. Olhausen, would you want to comment on that?
I think there's probably a variety of reasons that a small business may go out of business after a data security breach, including the financial implications that Mr. Rowe mentioned, as well as small businesses close to their customers, right? And if they lose customer trust, then I think that could also be
Okay,
be a
so
problem.
my concern is if we know we're being attacked, how do we protect the business's viability against that attack? If you're being sued, have you seen some business go out of business because they're being sued because of lack of data security protections?
I'm aware that some businesses have.
Because I can tell you from the financial side, if I'm a financial services regulator, and I go into a financial services credit union, bank, whatever, and I see I've got a small business there that is highly leveraged, and they deal with lots of personal data, there's an exposure there that I'm very concerned about, that if they have a data breach, is the viability of that business going to be affected? And so, how does that small business protect themselves against that liability exposure? What kind of safe harbor can we put together? This is where I'm going with the question is, can we find a way to provide a safe harbor, or is the safe harbor something like an insurance policy that is put in place to protect a small business which doesn't have the resources of a Target or a Home Depot who have some data breaches? I mean, I had a large supermarket in my area that had its own debit card, got breached, and cost several $100,000. It was dispersed among a lot, but it was significant. So how do we come up with a safe harbor for these small businesses? Is it an insurance policy to go down this road to be able to help them, or are they just exposed?
Honestly, you're right. They're just exposed right now. There is a fledgling industry on cybersecurity insurance, but frankly, even if you're insured, I wonder how the actuarial effort would work. You can go now and you can get your car insured. If you have LoJack, sometimes you'll get a rebate on your insurance. Sometimes you won't.
Well, my concern is if we've got some exposure, how do we protect the small businesses against that? And while Dr. Romine was very specific about some of the guidelines and principles that he's recommending here, that's fine. But if it doesn't provide the safe harbor, and if I'm looking at the viability of the business, to me, an insurance company is a whole lot more nimble and flexible to be able to come out and tell a small business, we found a new way, especially with the fintech industry today, continuing to evolve and continue to have all sorts of, I don't want to say the word exotic, but there's certainly interesting products out there that help integrate all of these different businesses and the payment systems. To me, you're going to have to figure out a way to have some sort of, I think the private sector is a better way to go about this, to provide that kind of coverage and safe harbor.
Well, I'd agree with you because I think in general the private sector is much more nimble. Rather than insurance, I would think about it from the financial sector point of view. There's a lot of money invested, whether it's through lenders like credit unions or 7A lenders or you name it, fintech, who all have a stake. Because if the small business gets hacked and goes under, they're not going to get repaid. So they have a stake in trying to build that up.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
yield
Gentleman's
back.
time's expired. It's my understanding that the gentleman from Missouri wants to make a unanimous consent.
Yeah, ICBA has a letter to the committee, and would like to make put it into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider, who is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Agriculture, Energy, and Trade, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and again, thank you to the witnesses for making the time to not just be here, but to prepare. I know how much work goes into this, so thank you for sharing your expertise and insight. You know, the issue of cybersecurity, the issue of dealing with these challenges for small businesses are complex, confusing, and constantly changing. That's one of the problems we face, and the risks keep growing. Mr. Mooney, you talked about the idea of trying to establish a national standard. I would imagine one of the challenges we face in doing that once we get consensus, it's going to be out of date. So opening this up to the whole panel, how in partnership, private sector, government, might we best work to address the dynamism, if you will, of the threat?
Well, if I may take the first shot at that question, Congressman, I think the experience that we've had in the financial services industry suggests that there is a way to not be locked into any particular perspective or way of doing things. The way that Graham Leach Bliley works is it provides a great deal of flexibility. It's risk-based, it's scalable, so that it addresses the concerns as they exist at the time. And in suggesting that we would want to have some sort of national application of that, we'd recommend that it has and follows those same principles.
Mr. Rowe?
Well, you're absolutely right. The shifting nature of the problem is sort of what militates against a national standard, unless that standard is based on responsibility, and it's just then becomes a question of who's going to be responsible. I would say in so many areas, whether it's a small medical practice that's dealing with HIPAA information, or a small business that may have a fair amount of financial information, a small insurance agency or an investment advisor, you've got to begin to follow the money. And you've also got to place responsibility on the merchant services corporations who you're dealing with. Amazon and eBay make a fair amount of money supporting small businesses who are selling. It might be an interesting idea to say they bear some responsibility in helping to educate the people who work with them.
But you talked about a small insurance agency. I had the privilege of running a small insurance agency. There were 2 producers, and we had a staff of 8. None of the 10 of us were the technology expert. Now, this was 1997 to 2003, an entirely different environment than what we're facing today. And as I think through this problem, I know what the time we spent on technology, on handling a lot of classified personal information and making sure that it was always safe and always protected. That just keeps getting increasingly hard. Are there ways that, whether it's the work you do, things that we can do to help small businesses, it's not even weather the storm, continue to stay ahead of the curve?
Well, and that's the whole key to what we're trying to accomplish here is build the resources and get the resources out so that small businesses can stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I'll add, it's you, as you talked about in your testimony, large corporations have resources and the people to do this and can stay, that it falls oftentimes to the smaller companies, especially, for example, the ones trying to do business through Amazon and eBay and other opportunities that are there. I appreciate that. I'm nearly out of time. I'll yield back the balance of my time to keep us on schedule.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Marshall, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Dr. Romine. You may know I'm a physician and have helped run a hospital as well, and healthcare seems to be particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks. Does NIST have any ideas on how to ensure the safety of healthcare data from cyber attacks? Are there any best practices? And, you know, especially I'm thinking of smaller community hospitals, that type of thing.
Thank you for your question. We have projects going on through our National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence having to do with specifically that. We have a program in protection of healthcare and healthcare information. We also have, as part of that program, a protection of medical devices. So, for example, we have a program on trying to secure wireless infusion pumps in hospitals and trying to understand the threat that they present to the patient as well as to the enterprise of the hospital as an entry point for getting into other parts of the system. With regard to the relation to small business, one of the things that we're looking at now and have completed recently for publication is trying to understand how to secure patient information or protected information when a physician is using a mobile device to access that that patient information. Anecdotally, we hear, for example, the physician really just wants to do the best for the patient. Some of the rules regarding the transfer of that patient information can get in the way of providing that, and so we're trying to find ways that we can secure that sort of communications mechanism to make it both more efficient for patient care as well as more secure.
Yeah. You know, as a physician, I'm more concerned about patient confidentiality today than I was 10 years ago. The worst thing I had 10 years ago, someone could come in and steal a chart. But now, if they crack the code, they have access to thousands of charts. So it's almost like this has backfired on us. I'll let y'all, I'm into solutions. One of the biggest concerns I hear from the banking institutes, credit associations, is when they have a breach, there's significant fines. Small businesses, I'm thinking of convenience stores where they're just doing thousands of transactions days with credit card. If they have a data breach, it still falls back on the banking institute. And I'm looking for solutions. How can we help both sides here? What's a solution that anyone would have to that problem, and so it doesn't always fall just on the banking institutes or the credit cards? Please, yeah.
Well, Congressman, I think our approach here and the suggestions that we're making regarding some sort of consistent level of standards for all players in the payment system, we think is vital to accomplishing what you were just talking about. Under Graham-Leach-Bliley, we are really given the duty to make data security our responsibility and our focus. And what we think is for the payment system to be viable, everybody has to be playing at the same level. Now, again, we talk about small businesses and big businesses. As GLBA has functioned, it is scalable. So the risks that a large multinational financial institution has is going to be much greater than a small credit union. And the risk assessments accordingly are much different, and the responsibilities are much different. But everybody is on the same page in terms of their responsibilities of protecting consumer, financial, and personal data.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment?
The Federal Trade Commission has in previous Congresses supported on a bipartisan basis federal data security and breach notification legislation that would give a clearer standard, a process-based standard to businesses, and also have a federal requirement that if there is a breach under certain conditions, they have to notify consumers about it, so they can also take steps to protect themselves.
Okay. And if I may, just to add to that, and that's the environment that financial institutions operate under today. And so you're suggesting just broadening it, which is what we think makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chilman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Murphy, is recognized for 5 minutes, and she's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce.
Thank you to our witnesses for testifying today. As was just mentioned, I serve as the ranking member on contracting and workforce. And you've discussed at length today in your testimony the great number of challenges that small businesses face in complying with or in dealing with cybersecurity. But I'm specifically interested in honing in on the challenges that face small businesses in the contracting community and how these issues will affect the ability of small firms to compete for and win federal contracts. You know, as you may know, it's becoming increasingly common prerequisite for small businesses to be able to meet regulations that demonstrate their ability to maintain safe and secure networks before they can even participate in the competitive contracting process. My concern is that over time, this may lead to more small firms losing bids, or it may even discourage them from engaging in the bidding process at all because they simply can't compete with larger companies that, unlike them, have the resources to hire and retain dedicated cybersecurity and IT personnel. So, Mr. Rowe, in your experience, how has the sheer complexity of these regulations so far affected the small business contractors that you've worked with? And what do you advise them as they face uncertain regulations and prohibitive compliance costs?
Well, the hardest thing any of them have facing them is just knowledge of the Federal Register. I would be willing to bet half of them have no idea that the Department of Homeland Security just put out a proposed regulation on, what do they call it, confidential unclassified information. Now, I'm not even sure what that is. But in all of these situations, and these are all operating from the best of intentions, all of these agencies, they're trying to protect sensitive information on everything from weapon systems to medical equipment. But that there is that tendency to go with the sledgehammer to kill a gnat. And small businesses are they're left behind in all of these regulatory efforts, because they've got to know what the Federal Register is, comment in the Federal Register, have that comment taken seriously, while frankly Lockheed and Boeing and SAIC have guys like me that they pay lots of money to do that for them. To date, it hasn't really become horrible. My concern is if you've got a defense acquisition regulation system, a federal acquisition regulation system, a Department of Homeland Security acquisition regulation system, all of which have cybersecurity regulations which may not all be exactly the same, and then you're requiring security protocols for a small business that may be working with 3 or 4 agencies and trying to get their security to match up with the security systems in 4 different computer systems. We all know that at a certain point it just doesn't work. That's the biggest concern that we have, is getting enough flexibility so that the small business can protect the data without having to do all their work in triplicate.
Do you have any suggestions on how that that regulatory process can be streamlined or rationalized in a way that would avoid the scenario that you just laid out?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what I said to the chairman. I think there needs to be an interagency coordinating committee on cybersecurity so that when the FAR Council, which is really just DOD, GSA, and the Office of Management and Budget, make a decision, there's been input from all the other agencies and from small business.
Great, thank you, and I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to everyone on the panel for your time today. I want to ask specifically about law enforcement corroboration and collaboration. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, particularly the FBI, are the two main law enforcement organizations responsible for investigating cyber-related crimes and national security-related cyber attacks. Dr. Romine mentioned the InfoGuard program. That's one of several programs that exists. My question, not only from the small business standpoint, but also I'm on the cyber subcommittee of Homeland Security. What is the collaboration currently? How has it been going in both directions? Because not only is it important that law enforcement receive this information to track digital fingerprints and patterns of cyber attacks, it's equally important for the small business community that there be a good relationship, that the Bureau and the Department of Homeland Security can share tips on the private side on how to best protect small businesses from cyber attacks. So if any one of you could just comment on what the status of relationships is with those two federal agencies, what works and what hasn't worked.
I'm happy to reiterate, thank you for the question. I'm happy to reiterate the importance that we accord to the partnership with FBI's InfoGuard program and the SBA as a mechanism for outreach to provide the kind of information that you just discussed, particularly to the private sector broadly, but particularly to small and medium businesses. I think that's been very effective, and it's a strong relationship.
Department of Homeland Security, has there been any relationship or outreach with them?
Sure, we have ongoing relationships with the Department of Homeland Security. They were vigorous participants during the development of the cybersecurity framework, for example. They spent a lot of time generating a voluntary program that they used in concert with and using the cybersecurity framework as it emerged to provide that kind of outreach. And so I think we had a lot of strong input from them and provided them a lot of useful information that they could then use in their voluntary program for people to adopt the framework or to get an assist in using the framework. We have partnerships with the FBI in other areas such as biometrics technologies, for example. That's a slightly a different topic, but with the understanding of trying to improve the accuracy of biometrics. That partnership goes back to 1963 with the FBI, so we consider that a pretty strong relationship.
Has there been any frustrations that you've heard from the small business community with regard to law enforcement not taking certain cases because they don't fall within the threshold that would allow for an investigative activity?
NIST would not hear something like that. I think that's not the kind of information that they would share with us. We do ensure that we have outreach to small businesses so that we can ensure that our work products, our cybersecurity guidance, is scalable and digestible at all levels. And we're working much harder on that to ensure that it's useful across the spectrum of all the way from small to very large enterprises.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. That concludes our questions to the panel. We want to thank the very distinguished panel for their testimony here today. It's been very helpful. I think one thing is clear, and that's that the people up here, the members on both sides of the aisle, want to do everything we possibly can to ensure that small businesses have the best possible cybersecurity resources available to them. And along those lines, we being the committee, we're going to be putting this up online today. These are easy to understand security packets that'll be available to small businesses. They're kind of step-by-step guides on how to protect themselves, small business folks, from cyber attacks. And these will be up on the Small Business Committee's website today. So just wanted to mention that. And I would remind folks that members would have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.